You've got a scene that takes place in that. Is it int car day, ext car day, int ext car day? And is it like this, or this, or this, or just plain this? Yeah, we're getting into all that today. If you're gonna take the time to tell a story, then tell a story that matters. We're focusing on Sluglines, and my goal is to answer all of the questions you have about them, and even some you may not have thought about yet. But if I happen to miss one, ask it in the comments below. So we're going over the function of a slugline, what they should include, what they shouldn't include, how to format them, how to use mini slugs, and then a few tips to round us out.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
To begin, there are three primary functions of a slugline. The first is the story function. Sluglines help the reader keep track of the locations taking place in your story so the reader can better understand and track with that story. And if you've looked at any screenplay ever, except for Nightcrawler and probably a few others that I'm not aware of, they all include sluglines for locations from New York City to Mars to wherever. But the ones that don't include sluglines, so you might be thinking, well, I don't have to include a slugline because Nightcrawler doesn't. They're all by established writers. And I'd recommend you not try that if you're writing a script to win a contest or if you're trying to break in. Readers expect sluglines, so don't disappoint them on this one. You can tweak them a little to suit your story, but I'll get into that in a moment.
Yes! Oh! Oh! I'll have what she's having.
A second function is sluglines imply budget for your film. Now, I need to be crystal clear. The script you are writing has not been sold yet. There's no actors attached, no directors, no producers, no one scouted locations yet. There's nothing, nada, zilch. The script you are writing is meant to be read first and foremost. So there is no budget for your film. However, the number of locations, the types of locations, whether your scenes take place in the day or at night, all of those things imply a budgetary cost, which does matter to readers. So if you say you have a low budget script, but then looking at your script, you have 93 unique locations, most of which take place at night, and a few of them in the middle of Times Square on New Year's Eve, you lie. You do not have a low budget film, because the locations alone imply a bigger budget. This is an evaluation tool that gets used by readers, especially at production companies who are looking for scripts within a specific budgetary range. And if they like your script, they're going to go back through it and see the budgetary implications of your locations.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
The third function of sluglines, which is more of a result of using them than a specified function, is that they can help you create white space on the page. In other words, they break up the read. They help the reader move through the script faster and find the natural breaks and be able to find what they're looking for if they're going back through it for any reason. What this means is you want your sluglines to either help you tell your story because you're using them in a unique or specific way, or they help the reader interpret your story faster because you are using them in a standard and specific way. So if you aren't using them as the reader expects you to use them, then you are screaming to the reader that you have no idea how to write a screenplay because you can't even use the sluglines appropriately.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
So what should sluglines include and what should they not include? There's essentially three parts to a slugline. First, int or ext, interior or exterior. This is pretty straightforward and just like it sounds. If the scene takes place inside, use int for interior. If the scene takes place outside, use ext for exterior. But Jake, what about that car example? I have a car in my script and I don't know what to put. Let me first say, don't overcomplicate it. Most scenes that take place inside of cars or phone booths or any other weird thing that can be both inside or outside are usually dealt with in pre-production. But that's not the script you're writing. Your script isn't in pre-production. It hasn't even been sold yet. Your script is meant to be read. So the first thing is don't overcomplicate it and stress about it. But here's a few questions you can ask to help you suss out which one you should put. Number one, are the characters fully enclosed in a space or bound by it? If the car doors are shut, it's interior. If the character is moving from outside the car to inside the car, then it's going to be exterior, interior. The order doesn't matter. You could do interior, exterior. I just tend to order it by how the character is moving through the space. So same example, but in reverse, a character parks a car and gets out and we follow the character, I'd write interior/exterior because that's the order. So a phone booth, interior. A pavilion in a park, interior if they're under the pavilion. A tent in the forest, interior. Going from outside the tent to inside the tent, int or int x. Doesn't matter. Again, order doesn't matter. Another question you can ask is if you were filming it, where would you put the camera? Would the camera be inside the space or outside the space? If the camera is in the car, interior. Outside of the car, exterior. Both interior, exterior. A third question, if practical lighting is going to be used, which means someone's going to plug in a light and use it to light the scene, is that light inside the space or outside of it? Inside the car, interior. Outside of the car, exterior. Both interior, exterior. Again, don't overcomplicate it and don't get all nitpicky about it either. Well, the character is enclosed in the space, so that's interior, but the camera is outside. So are the lights. So is that interior or exterior? Okay, it doesn't matter. Just pick one, use both, doesn't matter, move on. But if you type exterior living room day, okay, yeah, you screwed up. Living rooms are interior, so you got to get it right when you know. When it's clear, get it right. But make your best guess when you don't and move on. It's important, but it's not that important. They'll notice if it's missing, but if you say interior/exterior car, totally fine, move on.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
The second element of a slug line is the actual location. Statue of Liberty, office, boardroom, car dealership, porta potty, closet, roof, wherever. For the most part, you want to be specific about the location and succinct in your use of words. Nebula's boardroom is better than just boardroom because it's more specific. But Nebula's boardroom, 40th floor, Manhattan, is not succinct, and Nebula's boardroom is still the better option in this case. There are exceptions. For example, if we are in different boardrooms of Nebula's building, so some random company I made up, then we need to specify some distinction between those different rooms in the slug line. Again, we want to be specific but as succinct as possible. So we could do Nebula's boardroom 40th floor or Nebula's boardroom 37th floor if we want, or something like Nebula's boardroom Manhattan or Nebula's boardroom Buffalo. We just need something to help us differentiate the locations. And you can also do this with a house. Most scripts have at least one or two scenes at a house, so we could do something like this. Exterior Getty House Day. Cookie cutter homes, but the builders went crazy pastel with the color choices. This one's a mint green. Interior Getty House Living Room Day. Thankfully, the inside has more taste with wood floors, leather furniture, and a modest 60-inch TV mounted on the wall. So we can have the main location and then a sub-location. And you could use this format for the rest of the rooms if we're in any of them in the house. So Getty House Kitchen, Getty House Master Bedroom, Getty House Bathroom, you get the gist. And for me personally, I use commas to break these elements up. You'll also see dashes used in some scripts, but because you'll use a dash for the next element, I personally tend to not use them in the location element. That's a personal choice, total personal choice. You can do whatever you want, just be consistent. So if you start using a dash, always use a dash. If you use a comma, always use a comma. Again, you don't want to bump the reader. You want to help them read your screenplay and move through it.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
The third piece of the slug line is the time of day. Now, 99% of the time, you're going to use either day or night. Stop writing things like mid-morning, afternoon, noon, lunchtime, evening, midnight, dusk, sunrise, sunset, or whatever other ones you want.
What about breakfast?
I've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
Here's the thing. The only parts that matter are day and night. And if you're looking to keep costs down in your script, you're trying to write a lower budget film, day is cheaper than night. But if you have a significant story reason for a scene to take place at a very specific time, like sunrise or sunset, then in that case, yeah, go ahead and note them instead of day or night. But it's gonna be an exception, and it's gotta be for a story reason. If there's no story reason, nope. And if the very specific time is something like 2:27 p.m., you don't write 2:27 p.m., you write day.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
One other caveat here, you'll also see, and some of you may be using or thinking of using, addendums to the time of day. So it'd be something like day, comma, later, or continuous, or establishing. Don't. Not because they're bad, but because you don't need them. Most of the stories you write, you're writing in a sequential order, meaning that any scene you write is naturally going to come after the one you just wrote. So writing later or continuous is redundant. We're going for brevity and white space, so stop junking it up. If the reader can't figure out that the second scene comes after the first one, you have other problems there, Skippy, and adding in later isn't going to solve the problem.
Emmett, this is my boyfriend, Batman.
I'm Batman.
Establishing is a writer's choice, but I usually opt for not using it. Let's look at the example I used earlier of the Getty house. Is the first scene an establishing shot? Yes. Did you know that before I pointed it out? More than likely. Is the word establishing there? Nope. See? You don't need it for your story to make sense.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Moving on, so you've got the pieces of a slug line, but how do you format them? Bold, underline, italics, bold and underline, normal, extra space, no extra space. Honestly, the only wrong answer here is failing to be consistent in your choice of format. If one slug line is formatted one way and another is formatted differently, okay, that's a problem. Some scripts underline, some bold, some use an extra space, some don't. I've seen italics, but I haven't seen italics much lately. This was more in older scripts. That's more where you'll see it. And rarely do I see someone do two things together, so bold and underline or bold and italics. I mean, you could if you really want to, I guess, but here's the thing. Make the choice that helps you visually create more space on the page or breaks up your page, or make the choice that helps you more clearly tell your story. For me, my default is to not do anything other than have just a little bit of extra space before the slug line. Just a little bump to help it stand out on the page. Doing anything else calls too much attention to the slug line, and I find when I read scripts, I barely notice the slug lines, thus making the read faster. So you don't want them to dwell on the slug lines unless they need to dwell on the slug lines. But when the slug lines are bolded or underlined, okay, now the reader is going to pay more attention to them, which might be something you want depending on the story, and it might be something you don't want. I have written a couple of scripts where I did bold my slug lines. This was because there were sections of the script where I was moving to lots of new locations or jumping back and forth between a lot of locations, and I wanted the reader to notice the slug lines, because if they didn't notice them, they might have gotten lost in the story. So I've used alternate formatting, and you can use it too. Just make sure you're doing it for a story reason or to help the reader track with the story. And whatever you do, be consistent. Choose one format and stick to it for your entire story. And if you're using screenwriting software, you can set the defaults within the software, and any changes you make will be global if you're using the software correctly.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
But we also need to talk about using mini slugs. The best way to describe a mini slug is that they are used to refocus the action of the scene to a new location or character. Back to our example of the Getty house. We've got our Getty house, cookie cutter homes, Getty house living room, but Ben's sitting in the corner drawing in a leather sketchbook propped up in his lap. He puts the finishing touches on an 18th century pirate ship, complete with a Jolly Roger and all. His phone, positioned carefully right next to the ship, starts beeping as an alarm goes off. He silences it, closes the book with the pencil inside, and heads down the hallway, passing family pictures. He's the only kid in any of them. At the end of the hall, Ben's bedroom looks like an art store blew up. There's even what looks like a massive stain of red paint in the middle of the floor. In this scene, the mini slugs are being used to help track and move the action. But notice how they also add some white space to the page. And because they're all in the primary location of the Getty house, we don't have to create specific slug lines for each item. We could if we want to, but that's going to slow down the read. So in this case, each mini slug refocuses our attention and we aren't lost in the geography. And we go from the living room itself to a close-up of the sketchbook, to the hallway, to Ben's bedroom, all flowing from one to the next. The thing with using mini slugs is the action should be continuous. You don't need to use continuous as it should be evident, but mini slugs help communicate continuous action without you having to say it, and they can help point out the important elements of the scene. You can also use mini slugs to focus on people within a scene. Where I tend to see this and where I tend to use it is in the middle of action sequences or fights. We focus on one part of the fight, then jump to another part, but we're jumping not to locations and being broad, but to specific people and being specific. Exterior park night. Bob, Brandon, and Billy square off against Hank, Harry, and Hoss. Everyone eyes an opponent, all have their partner. Bob cracks his neck, Brandon balls his fists, and Billy cracks his knuckles. The H brothers are just as ready, and while there's no bell, the fight is suddenly on when Bob bull rushes Hank, tackling him to the ground. They're rolling and punching at the same time. Hank seems to be getting the upper hand. Brandon backs off, fists up, and his partner Harry is game. And they're like two seasoned boxers, matching steps, exchanging punches, but with a quick flurry, Brandon is beating Harry senseless. All Harry can do is put up his arms to block. But Billy isn't playing around with fisticuffs. He pulls a knife and goes after Hoss, who takes off running and screaming, not paying attention to where he's going, and he runs over Brandon, who looks up and has no idea how he ended up on the ground, but he reacts in enough time to block blows from Harry, who uses the opportunity to turn the tide of their boxing match. Now, I'd want to clean this up, and I would never use similar sounding names in an actual script, but notice the mini slugs here are not locations. They are characters only, helping us keep track of what is happening. So if you have continuous action and you want to refocus that action without creating a new slug line, feel free to use a mini slug to help you move the story along.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
A couple of quick tips to be aware of. Number one, don't say the same thing in the slug line as you say in the description. You don't want to be redundant in anything in your screenplay. So you wouldn't do interior house day. The house is mostly empty. You just write interior house day, empty, except for a folding chair and a garage sale lamp in the corner. Or don't include Manhattan in the slug line and then in the description say Manhattan. Just don't be redundant. Number two, be consistent with your formatting use. If you want to be bold and bold away, but do it for your entire script. Again, any formatting options are fine, but if you're going to stray away from the normal plain option, it should be for a story reason or to help your reader track with your script. And three, remember you're writing a script that's meant to be read. So you want to keep things as brief and as succinct and clear as possible. Slug lines can help the reader track with the story, which is what you want. And if they like it, they'll go back and look to see if it falls within their budget parameters. And to do that, they'll mostly be looking at slug lines and at the number of characters. And whether you've got 2 characters or 37, make sure you aren't doing one of the deadly sins of naming those characters, which you can find out about by watching this video right here. Thank you for watching, and be sure to drop a comment below about what was helpful in this video. And don't forget about all the buttons, and when you tell a story that matters. See you later.